Hello everyone, welcome to a brief podcast here in Brito Analysis. And today on Facebook we are quickly discussing if we are up to the new kingdom of evil, the new international superpower of evil, or the United Kingdom and Russia need to move on. But can we move on considering that Britain a few decades ago, I would say 15 to 20 years ago, has been living a nightmare in prisons of zombie drugs given to men on a daily basis, smuggled into prison. And these zombie drugs, I don't know if you are familiar with synthetic drugs like fentanyl, take control of the person, and once they take control of the person loses completely self-worth. They're more powerful than heroin, and they will not go back to their normal selves, and they are slaves to whoever for those drugs. They are very, very powerful drugs, and currently in the United States they are responsible for the big pandemic of homelessness and prostitution. Americans mostly prostitution. And children dying, left home alone, dying. Can we in Britain look at the news published by Russia yesterday, saying that at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, saying that they are moving on with the Eurasian Economic Union. On the 13th of December, Alex Overchuk holds a meeting of the co-chairs of the Intergovernmental Commission for Cooperation between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Kazakhstan, which are members of the Eurasian Economic Union. Considering that synthetic drugs started in Singapore, mostly in Singapore, and affected greatly the black community in America, and in here, started in Singapore and was produced mainly in Asian areas like Birmingham and shipped to prisons, and started mostly in Birmingham HM and Brixton HM. I wonder how Singapore, being in Asia, next to an Eurasian Economic Union, which has other dangerous countries. I will just give you the list of members, and bear in mind that the United States left Afghanistan last year. Members: Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia. Observer members: Moldova, Uzbekistan, Cuba. Prospective new members: Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Mongolia, Syria. Careful here, all neighboring countries of Afghanistan were all already mentioned. Free trade zone agreements or are due to be mentioned, like Iran, Vietnam, Iran, China, Serbia, Singapore. Currently negotiating free trade zone agreements. I hope Mexico is not here, but Argentina is here, Uzbekistan, Tunisia, Israel, Thailand, Indonesia, India, Egypt, Cambodia, Chile. We have countries that are already, and that will be, in a zone of free trade agreements with its own court and exercising jurisdiction at the international level over those countries, or any other country who wants to negotiate or export into these countries. I'll give you an example. You might be familiar that Poland produces several products and try to export. For example, Poland exports guns to Nigeria. But a few days ago, on the 9th of December, the court of the International Court of the Eurasian Economic Union, which is like the European Union Court, published the decision of the board of the Court of the that the application of Polish Machines, LLC, was satisfied that the decision of the Council of the Eurasian Economic Commission in the contested part was recognized as inconsistent with the law of the Union. This is the Eurasian Economic Union, and its effect was suspended from the date of entry into force of the decision of the Collegium of the Court. They are also taking part in annual scientific conferences of the Russian Association of Political Sciences. This union is also taking part of international Congress of Judges and taking part in promoting, celebrating the 1000th anniversary of the Supreme Court of the Russian Federation this month. So now we are talking about an European business, Poland, trying to export into this Euro-Asian Economic Union members and having to face this international court of the Eurasian Economic Union, which is highly promoted, sustained, and led by the Russian Federation. What will happen when Ukraine tries to export into the Eurasian Economic Union countries, or countries who are presently negotiating free trade agreements? What will happen when countries like Ukraine want to expand to these Euro-Asian Economic Union countries? And most important, how will Taiwan be viewed by these countries at the statutory and trade levels when it tries to export products, considering the current conflict with China? We are talking about not a caliphate like ISIS proposed to be, but a new arena of international power and problems who will either serve one end or the other. It will not serve globalization, because globalization, as it will stand in the future between Asia, Eastern Europe, and the rest of the world, will imply Ukraine, not only because of defense strategic priorities, but also because we are living in an era where all the problems we had in the 80s and in the 90s, mostly 2000 and since 2010, are magnified to the general society in Britain and neighboring countries. That is why I started this podcast speaking about how we still remember when the synthetic drugs, the zombie drugs, hit Britain and hit at the prison level. And who started this? The country who started this? Singapore. Which is also, I don't know if you are following me since a while, but I posted a podcast discussing how Africa should block Singapore investors, mainly Indian, which are the ones who started this in Singapore a few decades ago, of investing in Africa, because that money is not a clean money, it's money from drugs. And they should block the Singapore from investing. They should block other countries as well from investing in Africa. And Africa is not doing so, and is allowing a great amount of money laundering in the continent, what is not good. If we look at historical perspective and what is happening now in terms of the Eurasian Economic Union, we have to ask, how will the future configuration of security and defense at the level, at the geopolitical and trade level, going via Ukraine, provide stability and security if the Eurasian Economic Union is not at the same level of discussion and priorities, because it has a different jurisdiction, might not want to engage with the the other jurisdiction or the other priorities. You're not just talking about the weapon productions, because remember that these Eurasian Economic Union countries, they make weapons as well. They make weapons as well. They have different trade routes. They are cooperating with China at the level of a tremendous, gigantic route, which will leave Afghanistan out. Afghanistan has no idea yet how out they will be from this route, and which will potentially not give more money, but impoverish culturally and socially Afghanistan and other countries at the same level. And why do I say that? Because those routes, the eastern routes, what China is building and what Eurasian Economic Union is proposing, will not respect the cultural priorities, cultural and religious priorities of other countries, because views certain religions and certain beliefs as terrorist or potential threat of disruption. If we have this in a context where they want to expand and get leverage of other countries by the supply of gas and oil and access to routes and trade agreements, then we will have countries which will be further isolated and who might not have the necessary means to survive unless they join forces with non-aligned countries. You're not talking about Sudan, just Sudan. You're not talking about Somalia. You're talking about countries in the Middle East who have deliberately procured countries who are very isolated to establish a kingdom of a blind trade where nobody knows where or what is going on. Not surprisingly, bin Laden chosen Sudan in several occasions and Kenya in many others to visit a network to expand in surrounding countries. We do not want that. We do not want to be in a society where countries who are at war with Britain and the United States are left behind and then are forced to host not bin Laden as in the past, but other forces who can supply oil, gas, or whatever they need in the dark. But if we do not want that, we have to see how these new powers are not converging, they are diverging, and we will suffer, we the people will suffer. Because we had a progression of an expansion of the zombie drugs out of the prison system because gangs, international gangs, wanted to keep their operationals quiet. And mostly, you're talking about mostly, white gypsy men and Caribbeans, strong men who are considered very strong physically. They wanted to keep them sedated and quiet in prison. No questions asked. They would not be thinking about what have I done with my life. I've been hustling for a gang and I've earned nothing. And now we have this tremendous, violent expansion of synthetic drugs and fentanyl in Britain and the United States. And we cannot defend ourselves from that. The United States opened the door for Latin Americans' expansion of cocaine, etc. We had Afghanistan heroin drugs, which was a cultivation which historically, according to academic authorities, was transferred from India landlords to Afghanistan. So we have this transfer of cultivation, and now we have this gap that is happening and taking place between drugs that are farmed and drugs that are done in the lab. And at the same time, we have an Eurasian Economic Union, which is involving Singapore and other countries who will not be hesitating in sharing formulas, creating new demoniac products in the market for money to have their shares. If it's either the fintechs or whatever that's expanded in virtue of that exchange, I don't know. But just the trade configuration and the jurisdiction configuration of the Eurasian Economic Union and others has to be reviewed. Perhaps the European Union jurisdiction on trade has to be reviewed as well, especially considering Britain, Brexit, and the ROI. Normal people like me, I find the ROI charges ridiculous, especially as a crafter. If I want to bring any canvas from Germany, safeguard, I have to pay the ROI, and it's not possible, it doesn't make profitable. So obviously I will prefer Turkey and Pakistan to get my either fabric. But what will happen to other people who feel shy of going to these sites directly and buying directly from them? They have to pay high taxes. And this is killing the cultural sector, the textile arts, at the little level of the ones who execute and design. I don't think that the jurisdiction is only the problem, and the countries and their history in relation to synthetic drugs is only the problem. I feel that the position of Ukraine and the present conflict of Russia and Ukraine, and perhaps soon Belarus, another country of the European Union, is also a problem in understanding this future configuration and the impact that will have in Europe. You're not talking about refugees, impact in terms of refugees, of us in Kent having to see what's going on in the high streets with the port of Kailas, people coming all the time with their phones and seeing what we see. But also you're talking about the level of threat of terrorism that can come from countries who will be further isolated and forced once again to be under the spell of certain groups in the Middle East. Arabs are not terrorists. I'm talking about certain groups with negative impact in the Middle East as well, who historically keep taking advantage and looking at isolated countries as the right countries to get what they want, to create a war against the West and capitalize. And this will be done for all loss. So I'm just wondering how we can look at this news. I'm going through the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs news regarding the Eurasian Economic Union, and say that we don't have to take, we the people don't have to speak about it. We have to leave this for governments. For example, they are discussing the integrated information system. How will us here, normal citizens, have our data safeguarded once the Eurasian Economic Union has its own security and closes up its own security? If there's a data escape or hostage situation of your data in a hospital, at home, at a school, how will we have certainty that the Interpol, which has no authority there, or any other country that is under the Interpol or the CIA, will have their data covered or will not have to pay a ransom? I don't think we are going in a nice way, and it's terrible what's happening at the moment. And the pandemic of the synthetic drugs is just an indicative that there's a war which the authorities are not telling us, and there's a parallel war that is rising, and we have no defenses, and we have to, as the people, we have to start promoting sites and forums where you can discuss what are options for the future and how are we being safeguarded from synthetic drugs and from future international terrorist groups who will rise now, that there certain countries are once again being left at the margins of major Eurasian plans. Thank you for listening. Have a nice evening. Remember to follow my blog, Aryan Brito Analysis. Bye-bye.